The Nothing earphones have been my daily driver for about 9 months now, but thanks to a ton of requests from you guys, I picked up the JBL Tune 230 NC and I think this might just replace the Nothing. Hey guys, and welcome back. I never thought I'd be doing a comparison like this today which included JBLs because I never really liked the way they sounded, at least many years ago. It's nice to see that they've changed. Now, there are a few differences between the Nothings and JBLs, but before I get into the details of how they sound, let's deep dive into how they're built. The JBL case does come off as feeling a bit too plasticky because of the way that they're finished, but the earphones don't give you that same feeling. The Nothings come with a glossy finished case and earphones. The case has scratched up over all these months and I didn't want to put these in a protective case because then the whole transparent effect of having these is lost. The Nothings case has a metal hinge whereas the JBL has a plastic hinge. Both are spring loaded, but the JBL's hinge prefers to spring open than to snap shut, which makes closing of the JBL case sound like a much calmer clasping sound than the Nothings case. The JBL case does have a slightly smaller footprint compared to the Nothings, which could make it easier to keep in your pocket. Both of these cases have LED notification lights on the cases. The JBL has 3 lights on the case to show you its percentage when it's being charged or when it's opened. It'll represent 25, 50 and 100% charge basis which light is on. The Nothings case has a single LED light which glows green for 100% charge, amber for 50% and red for below 25% charge. This same LED also pulsates in white when it's ready to sync to a new device. The earphones of both these brands are put together well, but the JBLs tend to seem quite a bit larger than the Nothings. I find the left earbud of the JBL tends to feel like it may pop out at times, but it never has. Both remain comfortable over longer listening sessions. The girth of the JBLs can be because of a larger battery, which obviously has its benefits. The JBLs have their branding on either earbud with an LED on each bud's recessed area, which is also a touch surface. They come in a matte finish, whereas the Nothings come in a glossy finish with a transparent casing. These also have their branding on the stems in a very small and fine print. Accessing either of these earphones is relatively easy, but if you've got big fingers, you may find the positioning of the JBL earphones a little difficult to retrieve from the case. The Nothings are relatively easier to pluck out since they're just lying there, waiting to be accessed. Both these earphones come with Bluetooth version 5.2, ANC, ENC and even fast charging to name a few. The Nothings come with wireless charging, which is a convenient feature to have for some, and both brands' earphones have touch enabled areas. The Nothing have a touch area along their entire stem, enabling them to have a slide feature for increasing or lowering your volume, apart from having the usual taps and hold functions. The JBLs also can control volume, but with a series of taps. The Nothings have in-ear detection, which can be left on or switched off, whereas the JBL don't come with this feature. Both these earphones have a latency mode you can toggle with, but on their quickest latency modes, the Nothing is clearly quicker than the JBL. Both do have a slight delay when consuming video content, but the JBL is maybe even almost half a second slower than the Nothing at responding. So if you're looking at either of these for gaming, I'd say you're better off with the Nothings. These do not support simultaneous pairing with multiple devices, but what you can do is connect to multiple devices individually, which has to be done manually. They connect to the last connected device by default, but should you want to connect to your other devices, you'll have to go into their Bluetooth menu and select the earphones you want connected to them once the case's lid is open. It is a bit tedious to do if you're used to having multi-device pairing with a set of higher-end headphones or earphones, but at least you have the option to connect to more than one device. Most of these earphones features are in their app. At least that holds truer for the JBLs than the Nothings. In the Nothings app, you can toggle between the ANC and transparency modes, play around with the equalizer, which only has 4 modes to play with, which I'll speak about in the chapter about sound. You can customize the taps on either earbud to do various actions. You can switch the in-ear detection on or off, toggle the latency modes, which can affect the battery life if it's set to low latency mode. Find My Buds is a neat feature, and you can do your software updates as well. Moving on to the JBL app, which has the ambient sound control where you can control the ANC and transparency features. It's got an equalizer with 5 different modes, which I'll talk about in the chapter about sound, and you can also tune your own EQ with the manual control. You have the smart audio and video control, which either ensures maximum maximum quality of audio or better latency depending on which mode you're in. Then you have your gesture controls, which seem to be a bit limited in the sense you can decide which earbud does what. Like the left or right one can do either playback, ambient sound, volume or voice assistant control. So once you've selected a gesture control to do in the app, the bud is limited to doing just that function. The nothings here let you do everything from playing, pausing, next or previous track and even volume control. The JBL does seem limited here because of this approach. I may be nitpicking, but I don't want to keep going back into the app to change gesture controls in the long run. Then the JBL app has a voice aware feature which lets your vocals in or keeps them out to a certain extent while you're on a phone call. It's a neat feature to have considering some people aren't too comfortable listening to their own voice through playback. Then it has a voice assistant feature which can use the native voice assistant on your device as the Nothings can too. And they also have a Find My Buds feature just like the Nothings. Something I haven't liked with the JBL from day one is the acknowledgement chime it lets out whenever you change ambient modes. The chime is a little too loud for my liking. Single taps or double taps have a really nice soft beep, but the confirmation tone is a little too jarring. The Nothings have always been soft on the ear when playing back any acknowledgement chimes. The active noise cancellation on both these earphones is pretty good. Now I decided to test this out by opening the window of my studio, which is actually pretty close to a very busy street, and letting all those noises in. They are practically at par with one another, but the Nothings tend to let in slightly more higher frequencies compared to the JBL, and the JBL tend to let in slightly more mid frequencies than the Nothings. It's not intrusive because they both drop the decibel levels by quite a lot, and you won't really be able to tell the difference if you have music playing. The Nothings do have a max and light mode for the ANC, but the JBL just has an on or off. Both have a transparency mode which functions as it should. On the JBL, it's called ambient aware, and it also gets something called talk through mode. This ensures that you can talk to anyone around you, but if you have music playing, it bypasses the volume control completely. So if you increase or reduce volume, it won't affect the music audio at all until you come out of talk through mode. And when it comes to the environmental noise cancelling, the Nothings come with 3 microphones and the JBLs come with 4 microphones. Now these microphones are supposed to help eliminate any surrounding noise that is being fed toward your recipient, and there is really only one way to test this out. So I'm standing at the usual busy street that I normally do a lot of these recordings at, just to give you an idea of what kind of noise I'm dealing with. There is a lot of noise today. It's quite active today. There are vehicles going past. Everybody's honking. There is a bit of construction work going on at the back as well. And I am playing back to you right now on my camera microphone. So you will get a good sense of the amount of noise that these earphones are going to be dealing with. So I will shift over to the Nothing ear ones right about now. So this should give you an idea of how well these handle their ANC. And as I mentioned, these do have 3 microphones that are handling most of the noise that's coming in. There is some sort of AI that's dealing with the cancelling of the outside noise to make sure that you hear my voice the clearest. So this is obviously the worst kind of scenario you're going to be in on the road talking to your recipient. If you are sitting in an enclosed space, in an office, or even in your home, it's obviously not going to be this bad. So if these earphones can do this well in this kind of situation, it's bound to do that much better in an enclosed space. So what I'm going to do now is switch over to the JBL 230 NC right about now. And one thing to keep in mind is I have the Nothings on their ANC mode, which is on their maximum ANC mode. And if you are using ANC while using the JBL, it just disconnects it completely. So as soon as you make a phone call, you cannot activate or control ANC in any way whatsoever. So right now I'm able to hear all the noise that's coming in, all the traffic, all the honking that's coming in. It is sort of playing it back like a transparency mode. This is essentially more of a safety feature from JBL because they don't want you, I'm sure, getting hurt while you're going on a run or a walk if somebody is near you or there's a vehicle or somebody honking to let you know they're close by. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The ENC, you will be able to be a better judge of it because you're on the receiving end. You are right on the recipient, so you can tell what kind of audio will be played back to your recipient. So it will be interesting to see which one is a bit better. Now, this does have 4 microphones compared to the Nothing 3. I will find out in post-production what it is, but I think you guys are the better judge in this situation to see which one works better for you. And of course, do let me know down in the comments which earphones in particular you think do sound better than the other and why. And of course, I will see you back at the studio. don't talk about battery life in detail when I do these reviews, but I have been using the Nothings for quite a while now. So one thing I have noticed is that the battery tends to deplete quite quickly, especially if it's on low latency mode or if I'm taking any phone calls. So usually what I do is if I'm on a phone call, what's normally 3.5 hours listening time or 3 hours listening time, with a phone call, it drops down to as drastic as just 1.5 hours or 1 hour 20 minutes. So what I do is I just leave one earbud in the case and close it, because if the case is open, it doesn't charge the earbuds. I leave one earbud in the case while I start using the other earphone. And if that gets too low on charge, I put that into the case and take out the other one and close the case. So the earphone I've used does charge up. So this is a little tussle you'll have to do with the Nothings when it comes to their battery life, because they do have pretty small cells for such a demanding set of earphones. Now the JBLs on the other hand, now I've not used them for too long because they're fairly new, but they certainly do have much larger cells in the earphone, which explains their size, and the case also does have a larger battery than the Nothings. So I have noticed while using it for calls, these don't deplete anywhere as fast as the Nothings. Then again, keep in mind the Nothings I have are about 9 months old. They've been with me for that long. So there's bound to be a bit of cell depreciation over that time. But the JBLs, I have to say, are definitely much longer lasting than the Nothings, even when they were newer. Both these earphones support SBC and AAC codecs, but the biggest difference over here is where the Nothing comes with an 11.6mm driver, but the JBL comes in with just a 6mm dynamic driver. When it comes to their sound, I have tested these as they are straight out of the box. So the Nothings have been on their balanced EQ mode, whereas the JBL doesn't have an EQ mode on out of the box. I will talk about the EQ modes a little later in this chapter. On a volume front, both these earphones sound just about the same, but at 50% volume, the JBLs are just slightly louder than the Nothings. You can take these down to 10% volume and not lose lower and mid frequencies. They stay well balanced and well amped even there. I wouldn't recommend taking these over 60% volume if you want to preserve your hearing. These can get quite loud past that mark, the JBLs being the louder of the two if you do decide to go louder. When it comes to their sound stage, both of these earphones stage like most other TWS earphones in this price category. But surprisingly, it is the JBLs that tend to sound a little more expansive than the Nothings. The Nothings tend to give you a slightly narrower stage and don't have as much dimension as the JBL. The JBL tends to give you a sense of distance between you and some vocals, whereas the Nothings place the vocals slap bang in the phantom channel between your head. The JBL has a wider and taller bubble of audio in your cranium than the Nothings for certain, and doesn't feel as restrained. Imaging on both of these earphones is pretty good for what they're worth, but as unbelievable as it is, the JBL is finer, sharper and better defined than the Nothings. They image clearer, as if making the Nothings seem slightly out of focus. I wouldn't say these have scalpel-like precision, but they're marginally better than the Nothings here, making your listening experience that much more enjoyable. High frequencies come at you very similarly between both these earphones, but there are very slight differences. The JBL handles this range with a little more enthusiasm than the Nothings. It's not pushed out at you aggressively, rather it's delivered quite effortlessly, almost as if having a smaller driver than the Nothing makes it easier to drive. Not that the Nothings sound bad or worse in any way, it also handles this range well, just not as confidently as the JBL. Listening to Making Love Out of Nothing at All by Air Supply, the track begins with soft cymbal hits which sound a lot more present with the JBL, and it seems almost hidden away on the Nothings. That soft shimmer decay you hear off of a cymbal seems to be slightly lost when listening on the Nothings. Mid frequencies are in fact recessed on both of these earphones, as most other manufacturers are doing with a lot of other earphones. This seems to be a trend that everybody is following. But both of these manufacturers have tuned these earphones slightly differently. The recess on the Nothings make the vocals sound a bit thinner than what they should be to be able to sound more natural, making some vocals sound a little on the tinny side in comparison to the JBLs. The JBLs on the other hand have a fuller sounding mid-range, with some vocals sounding like they're coming at you from a little further away rather than losing out on some lower mid frequencies. Listening to Ursin Vulpine's and Anna's Without You, the roundedness of her vocals are slightly lost with the Nothings, nothings, whereas the JBLs present her vocal tonality with a sense of exuberance, making listening to this track not only calming, but giving you a sense of intimacy with how much you can feel from her vocals and lyrics. This track swells post a certain point in the audio, making a wall of sound with strings and horns coming in, filling your ears with a symphony of sounds. The Nothings can't handle this anywhere as well as the JBLs do. There's a lot that's lost with them, making them fail at bringing you any justice to the way this piece of music ends. The JBLs certainly sound like a much heavier hitter here, despite their smaller drivers. When it comes to their lower frequencies, I wouldn't say that any of these earphones are a slouch. Both of them carry their lower frequencies with energy and excitement. The Nothings tend to focus a little more on the sub-low frequencies, giving you a well-defined rumble if you're listening to dance music. But the JBLs push out bass to sub-bass frequencies with a little more energy, making them sound a little more bass-happy. Listening to major lasers lean on, the JBLs are more likely to put a smile on bass enthusiasts' faces than the Nothings. The Nothings do sound a bit on the scrawny side in this frequency range compared to the JBLs for certain. Now when it comes to the EQ modes, the Nothings are in their balance mode straight out of the box, and you do have other EQ modes you can shift to. You have 3 EQ modes you can switch to, which are fairly straightforward. More treble increases the treble response without getting too shrill, more bass increases the bass without making it sound obnoxious, and voice mode is more for listening to audiobooks. But the JBLs have a lot more TLC that's gone into their EQ modes. By default, the settings are set to off. Once switched on, you can toggle between jazz, vocal, bass, club and studio. As you can see from the visual EQ representation, some of these EQ modes are boosted to an immense level. I'm sure some people will appreciate certain EQ modes here, but I find them to be a bit too exaggerated for my taste. I do prefer the flatter sound of these with the EQ off, but I do tend to play around with the inbuilt EQ at times. It's amazing because you're not restricted to 3 or 4 bands of control. You can add as many as fit on the spectrum, giving you quite the range of control for tuning these earphones the way you'd like them to sound. So to sum up, when it comes to their build, both of them are well put together. The Nothings have scratched up over time, which was expected from day one, but the JBLs do have a matte finish. Now, these won't really scratch as aggressively as the Nothings, but this kind of finish does tend to show soft thumbnail scratches where there's just sort of a graze over the material. It doesn't look as bad as the Nothing over time for sure. I do have a set of old Soundcores that went through the same treatment, and they have this sort of finish, and it's not looking too bad even today. Both earphones have been built pretty well. I've not had any issues with either of the earphones. I did have a suspicion that the Nothings would maybe start coming apart the older they got, because thanks to that see-through design, they used a very little amount of glue to sort of hold the top and lower section of the earbud together. You can't even see the glue for that matter. It's done really well, but at no point have these earphones looked like they're going to come apart. They are built well, they are IP rated, so I do expect these to work for a much longer time. The JBLs are also sealed pretty well. There's no real issues I've had with the earphones. They are pretty fresh, so maybe in a long-term report we'll know more in detail how they've fared. When it comes to the features, I kind of lean a little more toward the Nothing, because the wireless charging is a neat feature to have. Not that I usually wirelessly charge them, but now and then when I just want to toss them on a wireless charger on my desk to charge up, it's convenient to do. Easy to forget about once you're done doing your work, they're charged up. Then the one thing to keep in mind with the JBLs is they do come with a charging cable, but the connector port at the bottom of the case is a little too narrow. So if you're using a USB-C cable with your phone and you try to charge it with the JBL case, it may not fit. So you're better off using the included cable that came with the JBL. The JBLs not having the play pause feature when putting it to your ear and removing it is a bit odd, because I've even reviewed earphones for 3,000, 3,500 that have this feature. It's kind of standardized now. So I wonder what went on in the meeting when they decided to not include that feature. Then of course it doesn't have wireless charging, which again is more of a luxury thing to have. Something else is weird with the JBL is that whenever I try to connect to the app after opening the lid, it refuses to connect. So sometimes I need to close the lid and open it again, or even sometimes put the Bluetooth off and on my phone just to make sure it connects to the phone properly and goes into the app. But it's been very glitchy. I hope there is some sort of software update for the app in particular that corrects this issue, because it just locks you out. You can't go in and change any settings. You have to be very patient and hope that it goes in. I face this issue. If you are using the same set of earphones, do let me know if you're also facing this issue, because it is a bit weird. Now when it comes to the ANC, I'd say both are very similar, especially if you listen to music. I mean, you can't really tell what is being let in or going out if you're listening to any audio. Yeah, both of them do let in slightly different frequencies if you're just sitting to just enjoy the peace and quiet, but they do drop the decibel level pretty low, so I don't really find any need to complain about the ANC. I like both of them. And of course, now when it comes to the call quality, I'd be interested to know what you guys think, because you guys are the ones who are interested in, you know, making sure your recipient can hear you very clearly. I myself don't take or make too many calls. Even if I do make a few calls, they don't last as long as some of you guys. I've heard some of you like to have call times as high as 3 hours, which is quite crazy to be stuck to your phone too. I don't remember the last time I've done that, but do let me know what you think about the call quality down below. I'm sure you've understood well enough from the demo samples how good or bad they are. When it comes to the sound, I'm pretty surprised because I never thought something would come along and bump the Nothings off its podium. If I'm being honest, the Nothings are a first generation product and they've been really superb at what they've done. I've been really happy listening to them through the day, even at night before I calm down and fall asleep. I did always find the Nothings to be very clear and crisp and good at delivery. But then again, the JBLs have come along and they do those things but slightly better. And you can tell that especially when you compare the two back to back. So it's not that the Nothings are a bad product, they're still a pretty good product, but I think they have to be very particular with how they price them now if they want them to be relevant in the market. The JBLs certainly have a lot more kick and enthusiasm in their delivery when it comes to their sound when you put them against the Nothings. And this is a classic case of driver size does not equal better sound. I mean, the Nothings are almost twice the size of the JBL's driver, but clearly JBL has spent a good amount of time tuning these little drivers to make sure they sound their absolute best, and they've absolutely nailed it with this. So if you can learn anything from this, I'd say don't look at specs on a sheet. Just because a set of earphones has a larger driver does not equal better sound. It really boils down to how the company has tuned their earphones. Now, I do wish the JBLs did have a slide control. That's the one thing I've really missed from them. I can do without the wireless charging and so on, and I find that limitation of setting one earphone to a specific control setting is a bit limiting, but I suppose I could live with that because once you find a comfortable setup, it's there to stay. Another positive with the JBLs is obviously their battery life is going to be significantly better than the Nothings. I don't think I'm going to be charging it as frequently as I have been charging the Nothings, and even if you're going to take a lot of phone calls, I think the JBLs are most likely going to benefit you. So how much do both of these earphones cost? Well, at least right now at the time of recording this, the JBLs are going for between $55.99 and $59.99 on Amazon and Flipkart, and the Nothings are sitting at $6,999 on their website and on Flipkart. So I'm sure these prices will sort of keep fluctuating because the Nothings going for $6,999 right now I think is a bit of a surprise. This was when they first came into the market, and I've had a few people who've gone to buy the Nothings at about $5,500, and they've used some coupon codes or deals from their cards and so on, and even managed to get them for as low as maybe $4,000 or $4,500. But right now, considering they've been marked up to almost their original price, I think it'll be close to impossible to get them as low as that. So it's worthwhile waiting for one of these Amazon deals or Flipkart deals, whatever. I'm sure there are, we keep having these sales that go on. It's worthwhile keeping an eagle eye out to see if you can get a better deal. So as of right now, the JBLs are actually not as expensive, which is actually quite surprising. So would I recommend any of these earphones to you? Well, to put it simply, yes, I would recommend both. And by recommending both, I mean it's a matter of your preference, because you might be someone who is interested in having a better designed case. Well, the Nothings do play that part very well because they're very different, they're very funky to look at. The JBLs don't look as flamboyant or as fancy. Then if you're looking for something that has slide controls for their volume, something that I personally really like, you can go for the Nothings. Then again, if you want to go for something that has more battery power, more battery life, especially for those phone calls, the JBLs would be the clear winner on that front. So it's a matter of preference. I hope I have described everything well enough for you to understand how these two earphones differ and help you understand which set of earphones is more for you than the other. And as for me, I think I'm going to be using the JBLs as my new daily driver. So the Nothings are going to take a back seat, which is kind of sad. But I will be doing my long-term report on these because it has been 9 months and I have been very happy with them. yeah, they've had a few glitches, but I will get in detail about that in my long-term review. And I do hope that this video and my review has helped you understand these earphones better to make some sort of purchase decision. And of course, if you would like to support the channel, I'm sure you know exactly how to do that. And of course, thank you for tuning into Paul's POV for some sound advice.